Hello everyone and welcome to our RTV's Worldviews series. In this new episode I will introduce you a man who is an international famous director, screenwriter and also documentarist. I will give you Richard Stanley. Welcome to this show.
Well, it's a pleasure to be on the show, sir, and a pleasure to be in Savonlinna, Finland.
Yesterday evening I had a pleasure to participate an esoteric documentary film evening, and that event was organized by Boris Brandin and Abraxas Publishing Company. It was very nice evening with esoteric document films from Lauri Ainala, Jan Ies and you, Richard Stanley. And I have to say that especially your document, The Other World, which was from back in 10 years, I was finding very touching and also very close to me. In that document you were open up of your spiritual experiences and thought about area where has happened mystical phenomena in South France Pyrenees. That was very interesting. So, but let's go back in the time to the moment when you first time discovered to be interested of a mystical side of life. When did it happen and what actually happened?
And I think I was always inclined towards a magical worldview, thanks to my mother. Mm-hmm. My mother was an anthropologist, and in the early years of my life, before I started school, she was researching a book on the myths and legends of Southern Africa, and as a result was touring around all these different very remote tribal areas, interviewing the different witch doctors, the people that we call sangomas in South Africa. And as a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, I had no idea that there was anything unusual about these people. This seemed like normal reality to me. I had not yet encountered the so-called real world. So, I found these traditional healers, the sangomas, very entertaining people to be around as a child. There were many things they could do, like there was one guy named Zizwi Zonkwi, who could take 2 snakes and put them in his mouth, and one snake would come out each nostril. And these things made me laugh as a little boy, the ventriloquism and the sounds of the spirits talking from the eaves of the hut. So it was normal for me up to about 6 years old to believe in elemental spirits, in invisible beings, in the powers of sorcery. It was only when I started at school that I realized these things technically did not exist in the so-called real world. Either that or they were vilified as being satanic or somehow evil and dangerous. And then I must have spent most of my school career trying to suppress that material and trying to pass as normal. Although I certainly learned that the threat of the supernatural was enough to keep bullies away and to keep keep me safe at school. The other kids were too scared to mess with me mostly, which was helpful. It was only in later life that I started to I had the freedom to re-examine those instincts.
Well, so your mother was the anthropologist, and that way also those stories was in part of your life and in very early age, and then you had those own experience what you saw in everyday's life. So was that kind of culture in that time something what was in openly or something to hide?
Unfortunately, I grew up in southern Africa until I was 16, which was dominated by the Dutch Reformed Church and by a missionary culture. So I rapidly learned that almost everything that I was interested in was technically illegal or subject to South Africa's version of cancel culture. They were very frightened of supernaturalism in a similar way to, I think, communism and Islam both resist supernaturalism in the same way. So in South Africa, at that time, The Exorcist and the Omen movies, the 70s devil movies, were all illegal. Rocky Horror Picture Show was banned. People went to jail for having VHS copies of Rocky Horror, or Dawn of the Dead, the Romero zombie movie, was also criminalized. Of course, as a 13-year-old, I loved zombie Holocaust movies, so me and my friends were all secretly watching these banned tapes. And the same went with the magazines. Heavy metal comic, the Warren comics, Creepy, Eerie, and Vampirella were all criminalized under the apartheid regime. Even The Howling by Joe Dante, Scanners by David Cronenberg, ridiculous movies that were banned, which could not possibly have influenced any child to do anything weird, but this was their attitude. And by taking these things away from me, by making them unavailable, it increased my desire as a child to watch the movies and to participate. So when I finally escaped from the country, I went on a binge of immersing myself in as much of this supernatural material as I could get my hands on.
So you were 16 when that happened. It was the same time when you start to think about how to educate yourself, and how this film industry came to your life.
I think the film industry was always a part of my life from the point of view that my father was a failed filmmaker. So again, I grew up around film equipment. There was old-fashioned analog editing equipment sitting around the house, and I was able to crank the handles on it and see the pictures move. So I think this was part of my consciousness from the beginning. I was experimenting with Super 8, making initially claymation dinosaur movies, and then graduated onto using the human actors, and made my first caveman movie when I was 15, and it kind of grew from there. By the time I arrived in the United Kingdom, all I really had to show for myself were a bunch of strange Super 8 movies with crazy-looking people dressed in a weird way, behaving strangely in these African landscapes, and the only job I could get as a result was working in music videos, doing promotions for bands. I found a natural home in the music industry, and started doing ultra low budget videos for bands who were trying to get recording deals. And then I got lucky with the bands that I got involved with. The first group I did a video for was a sort of a goth metal band from Stevenage called Fields of the Nephilim. And I did the first two music videos and the first album covers for Fields of the Nephilim, who then got a recording deal and went on to being pretty legendary. So it was lucky I started with them, and then I graduated from there to a group called Renegade Soundwave, and then the third video I did was for John Lydon's band Public Image Limited. So yeah, I got very lucky with the groups I was working with. And by the time I got to the third video, it had gone all the way to a full union crew and with crane, makeup van, etc. And suddenly I was, I didn't know how to do it, but suddenly I was directing a full crew. And then these music videos basically worked as proof of concept for Hardware, the first feature film I made, which was really springboarded out of the low-budget music sector.
And since that, you have been working with very famous musicians, and so your active career, according to the internet, they say that starting 1983. Is this correct? And how did it happen?
Well, 83, I made a short caveman movie named Rites of Passage, which got me expelled from the film school in South Africa, caused a lot of trouble, and then won an international student film trophy in London up against work from UCLA and University of Southern California, and I guess that drew a certain amount of interest. Another Super 8 movie I made also won a prize on the BBC Two, on the British state television, and got broadcast, and again drew some attention. And really it then devolved into a few years of me working in kitchens, scrubbing floors and doing odd jobs around London while relentlessly sending VHS copies of the Super 8 movies to every production company and television station I could, with accompanying scripts and chunks of material. And then it was through a series of flukes. I'd actually given up after about 4 or 5 years of making. By 1989, I'd made so many music videos, pretty much one a month to pay the rent, that I was starting to feel burned out. And in 89, I made the decision to drop out of the record business and making music videos, and went to Afghanistan to make a war documentary instead. I thought that we needed to change it up and do something more real. And in my absence, while we were effectively trapped in the Hindu Kush, one of the scripts I'd written before leaving, which was the basis of Hardware, got passed around from one hand to another back in London, and somehow found its way into the hands of the notorious Harvey Weinstein, the Miramax impresario, who decided he wanted to wholly fund it. Hardware was shot for 800,000 for under $1 million. It was a small movie. And for his sins, Harvey Weinstein put up the money for that. I had no idea about it because I was trapped and trying to escape from a war zone in Afghanistan at the time. And didn't know how the project was coming together back in London until I arrived. So it was a series of crazy flukes in 1989. That effectively propelled me from straight from the war zone onto the set of Hardware, which and I guess shooting the first feature film is what I got instead of counselling for post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah. So and where that leads to your path in spiritual way? Did you have that interest going on in when you was focusing to these films what you made until so how this spiritual path was it still there, or?
It was still there, but pretty much suppressed. In Afghanistan, I was looking for Shambhala, and didn't find it, of course, but heard enough stories. There was in particular a Bactrian sun temple in the Hindu Kush, where the given name was Shamsi Bulk, the high light or the high candle, and I was under the impression that Shamsi Bulk might turn out to be Shambhala. So there's sort of these hidden initiatory schools in the Hindu Kush that Gurdjieff writes about, and the Sufi tradition were floating around in my head. But I saw very little evidence of it. And really, I didn't restart on that path until the summer of 1990, after Hardware.
Are you talking about this Haiti trip?
Oh, that came later.
That came later.
Yeah, really the thing that spurred it, and I guess if there's time to delineate this, it's the only professional film director in the industry who befriended me or treated me like a normal human being at that point in time was the Italian horror film maestro Dario Argento. Yeah. I met a lot of other folk, like I met Alan Parker, the director of Bugsy Malone and Angel Heart, but when Parker shook my hand, he just looked right past me and kept having the conversation with the person he was talking to, whereas Dario actually engaged with me. I didn't realize it was because Dario was looking for some way of scoring some marijuana while he was in England, but once I gave him a joint, Dario kept in touch and kept coming back. So in a funny way, Dario became my mentor in the industry. And Dario's movies, particularly Suspiria and Inferno, have their own strange private cosmology dealing with the three mothers. These three furies, Mater Tenebrarum, Mater Suspiriorum, and Mater Lacrimarum. And it was in the summer of 1990, promoting Hardware, I got sent to Spain to represent the movie at the Sitges Film Festival. And being young and arrogant, I hired a car at the airport in Barcelona, thinking I could drive down the coast to get to Sitges easily, and became hopelessly lost on the ring road around Barcelona. And after driving in circles for about an hour, I saw these high spiky mountains on the horizon, and the road went towards them, and then I saw there was a basilica or a monastery really high up on the mountain, and I had this stupid idea that if I stopped the car and caught the funicular railway to the monastery, I'd be able to see where the coastline was. This was long before sat-nav or GPS. I'd find my way back, and I caught the cable car up to the monastery, and found there were hundreds of pilgrims up there, and discovered that they were all making pilgrimage to the icon of Our Lady of Montserrat, this very powerful Catalan Black Madonna who presides over the Pyrenees. And seeing that the Lady of Darkness was being worshipped by hundreds of people in Montserrat immediately provoked questions in my mind about who she was and what force she represented and how long she'd been there. It was also the first time I'd touched the edge of the Pyrenees. I didn't know it yet, but further into those mountains there was a lot of things waiting for me. It was a series of happy accidents. I mean, in the initiatory tradition, I think there's an old chivalric tradition where when you don't know what to do, you let go of the reins of the horse, and the horse carries you to where you're supposed to go. I think this is how Ignatius of Loyola first came to Montserrat and laid down his spear in front of the Black Madonna. Schiller says Montserrat sucks you in from the outside world into the inside world. And I think it was that first time on Montserrat that reawakened, or at least drew my attention to the European esoteric tradition, made me realize there was something going on there which I could not read about in books and which I hadn't fully understood.
Yes, and this Pyrenees start to send you some kind of calling that you was in first time 10 touching Pyrenees, and you felt something which keeps you going back. Or did it went like this?
Yeah, it drew me in bit by bit. I got gradually sucked into the matter. About a year after that, I got offered a job by Channel 4 Television as a researcher. They'd had a hit documentary called The Rel Jurassic Park about retrieving dinosaur DNA from amber. Okay. They wanted to do a follow-up along the lines of the Rel Raiders of the Lost Ark. They wanted to do a documentary about whether the Nazis were really looking for the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, and the Spear of Longinus, and these various sacred power objects. So they sent me back to Europe with basically full funding to track down the backstory, to try and find any surviving members of the Ahnenerbe SS, the SS Archaeological Department, and see if they would agree to be interviewed for British television. Obviously this job plunged me very deeply into that hidden world. I mean, 90% of the material from the Ahnenerbe is very, very questionable and based on pretty poor research, but there was a residue of stuff in there that didn't explain away, that remained provocative and troublesome. And among this was the work of Otto Rahn, the Grail expert who had worked for a couple of years for the Ahnenerbe SS, and Rahn had basically connected the Grail myth to the high history of the Cathars, the Albigensian heretics who were exterminated by the French in the 12th and the 13th century. And he'd made a linkage between the mythical Grail castle and the castle of Montsegur in the Pyrenees. And this provoked me to go to Montsegur in person and to check out Rahn's claims. All the other Reich historians were happy to dismiss Rahn as a lunatic. I remember when I made the first treatment, one of them remarked that it showed how irrational the Nazis really were, but before dismissing Rahn as a nut job, I felt I had to go to the place he was writing about and see it for myself. And the more I saw, the more difficult it was for me to dismiss Rahn's thesis. And given that the television company had little interest in pursuing the story, that particular aspect of the story, I continued down that route. I cold called family members and former friends of Otto Rahn, who I found in the telephone directory. I found telephone directories for Stuttgart, for Geneva, for Darmstadt, for the different locations, and looked for family names and called people, and very rapidly found nieces, uncles, cousins, and close relatives of Otto Rahn, the Grail hunter, in his immediate circle. And then spent approximately 7 or 8 years digging into that story. Between around 91 and 98, I was pretty much pursuing it full time.
That is impressive. So, because we don't have so much time for this interview, let's go to this yesterday's evening. You had this Other World document, which was, for me, it was very touching. And would you tell more about that?
Connected to Montsegur, the castle of Montsegur in the Pyrenees is the scene of the last stand of the so-called Cathars, the vanished heretics of the south, in the winter of 1243 to 1244. There was a final siege of Montsegur, a final battle that lasted approximately 10 months, where roughly 300 people stood against effectively 6,000 to 10,000 dogs of war who had come to take them down. And at the end of that battle, the survivors were given the option of either being burned alive at the stake or recanting and returning to the Holy Roman Church. And famously, a large number of the folk who were there opted to die rather than recant. Beyond that, a lot of people who had fought alongside them through the 10 months were so moved by what happened, by the final ritual that took place at Montsegur on the spring equinox in 1244, that they were also spontaneously converted and chose to, even though they knew they would sacrifice their lives, they would have to die in the fire for joining them. And it's difficult to imagine what kind of force, what kind of demonstration of faith can be so strong that it can convince anyone to willingly go to the stake. There's that about it. And Montsegur has the castle has a chatelaine, has a lady connected to it. Historically, this is the figure of Esclamande de Foix, the Cathar priestess whose name means the light of the world. This Esclamande de Foix was a real historic personage who stood in opposition to the Holy Roman Church and to patriarchal rule. And although the Inquisition tried in every way to get their hands on her, they never caught her. They called her the Fox of Foix because she was so hard to get. And although it's assumed that she eventually died, no date of her death was recorded, nor do we know where her body lies. And over the course of 7 centuries, a myth has grown up that Esclamande never died, but transcended the material world and passed alive into the kingdom of heaven like Christ or Elijah, or was transmogrified into a dove, into the living symbol of their faith. Mm-hmm. And this notion of the White Lady, or the Guardian of the Grail, the Guardian of the Mountain, has been passed down in mythology. She has a number of different faces. In the locality, there's also an association with the fairy world, where the White Lady is also on some level the queen of the fairies. And there's people who will argue that the Albigensians are related to our notion of elves, mostly because of this root word albi, which means white, as in albumen, egg white. Albino literally translates as the white people, and the White Queen, or the White Lady is as mythic a figure maybe as Queen Titania or Queen Mab from Shakespeare. There's some historic roots, but she's clearly also a myth. And then over the centuries, the notion that this guardian of the castle is still there, still appears to people, remains cogent, and right down to the 19th century. In the late 19th century, Jules Douanel believed he was channeling Tau Esclamande and the ascended Cathar adepts by taking the supreme initiation. The adepts were supposedly able to transcend time and space, transcend the cycles of time. So spiritists and spiritualists in the late 19th century and early 20th started thinking that maybe through channeling they could reach out to the ascended masters to restore the lost initiatory tradition. And different trance mediums and channelers began channeling Esclamande from around 1895. It's when Jules Douanel declared it the era of Gnosis restored and founded the Gnostic Catholic Church in France, and allegedly channeled this Gnostic Mass, which then became the central ritual of not just the Gnostic Catholic Church, but the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis, also hold this channeled Gnostic Mass as their central rite. So there came a time, I guess, from the 19th century where Esclamande's spirits started becoming more active, started showing up in seances and in Europe and then in England. I'd read the stories, but I'd assumed it all to be a romantic dream or wishful thinking until 2007, when by chance or mischance I saw the White Lady for myself, and I was unable to explain it away because there were 2 of us present in the castle at the time when the apparition manifested.
You and your girlfriend?
Yeah.
Yes.
And as a result, I was unable to tell myself afterwards that I was having an acid flashback or a temporary lapse of sanity. There was no escaping the fact that we'd seen the glowing apparition of a young lady with braided hair and a girdle a cross tied around her waist, and this hooded cloak mantle, which gave her an outline very similar to the shape you'd see in traditional Marian apparitions. In that, if it hadn't been the castle of Montsegur, which is cursed by the Catholic Church, I would have assumed that we were experiencing an apparition of the Virgin Mary, except she had what appeared to be a sword or some kind of knife at her side, which on the one leg, which again isn't really the remit of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Yet also there was a change in the atmosphere around the apparition. The air felt warmer, and it smelt very differently. There was a strong smell of lilies or roses, a very sweet smell, which is very commonly reported in Marian apparitions. It's described as the smell of sanctity.
And that figure, what you saw, was it kind of solid, or could you see it through that shape?
No, she was surprisingly solid,
okay,
which was creepy. Not only that, when she walked and moved, I could hear the pebbles crunching underneath her feet. She seemed to have weight and mass, even though she appeared in this north-facing tower of the castle where there was no other door or way in or out of the room. When we initially saw her, I assumed that she was a human being dressed in some kind of costume. But she seemed to glow, but she glowed in the same way that a human might glow if they were wearing UV paint. And so I initially thought she was a hippie or some kind of modern-day Gnostic priestess doing her private ritual. It was only when I realized that there was no access, there was no other door to the room, and when she disappeared out of the room again without seemingly needing a door, that I was forced to concede that we'd witnessed some kind of time slip or some kind of supernatural manifestation. That maybe it was something that's recorded in the rock or in the crystalline structure of the mountain that was using our nervous systems like wetware to replay itself, or some people have suggested maybe it was an egregore, something that was created or prayed into existence by generations of Neo-Cathars and the different people who have been channeling at the mountain. But she certainly existed outside of my imagination, and it seemed to be tangible and real.
And also your girlfriend saw it.
Yeah.
So that is not imagination.
Yeah, and since that time we've also found multiple people who have apparently seen the same thing and have written about it. There's a Danish gentleman named Lars Mule, who's effectively a kind of a Danish Neo-Cathar guru now, who has his own group going. Lars's accounts of meeting this glowing feminine force on the mountain, I don't doubt it's the same thing. I'm sure that he saw the same thing that we saw. I hear these accounts over and over. People talk about seeing an angel on Montsegur. She's nearly always a glowing female apparition. Her age changes. Some people describe her as a child. But I think that depends on who's witnessing her.
Do you think she tried to communicate with you or send a message which you actually understand afterward?
The point when I was privileged to see this apparition in the castle, it was 2007. It was already roughly 17 years after I'd first come to Montsegur, and I think I'd completed a lengthy documentary on the life of Otto Rahn. We'd translated Otto's second book, Court of Lucifer, into English, where we'd been pretty instrumental in getting his first book reprinted by Inner Traditions, the Vermont-based publishing company that reissued Otto's books, and I felt my work was done. on the return to the castle. I only came back because the lady with me at the time, Scarlett/Tracy, wanted to see months ago. I hadn't been back for a bunch of years, so we did a day tour back to the village and climbed up to the castle. And I think that if that hadn't happened, I probably would have gone back to my life and moved on and forgotten about it. I think it showed us just enough to keep me there, to stop me from leaving, to show me that actually I knew nothing and still hadn't gotten anywhere close to understanding what was at the heart of the mystery. I was all ready to close the case at that point, and then I realized that, of course, it was far deeper than I'd imagined, and that there was some supernatural force at work on that mountain. And it was that episode that convinced me to give up my life in the outside world and to move to Montsegur full time in order to try to better understand the forces at work. The White Lady effectively recruited me as a defender of the castle and a sort of de facto guardian of the mountain, which was a task that kept me occupied for the next 10 years. And unfortunately, in Montsegur, there's always something that the castle needs protecting from. It's not a dead issue. At the time, I thought it would be easy. That it would be simply a matter of sitting in the Pyrenees and writing and meditating. I didn't realize just how many forces are still bearing down on that place, and just how complex it is.
Yeah, so industry, once they put mines in everywhere, same happens here in Savonlinna. But anyway, do you still live in nearby this castle?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
That's going to be a lifelong thing. The place looks after me and protects me, which I'm grateful for. It's kept me alive over the years, and it's kept me sheltered. I don't feel I've fully completed the work yet. This year, Inner Traditions will be releasing The Last Crusade, which is basically the tidying together of all of the research I've done into the Otto Rahn affair, into Rahn's quest for the Grail and his theories about the castle of Montsegur. But I would like to continue to write on the subject. The more so given the difficulties surrounding it, and Catharism was effectively repressed for 7 centuries. And there's something that we refer to as the Cathar prophecy. In 1321, before his death at the stake in Villarouge Termine, the last Cathar adept, Guilhelm Belibast, allegedly said that after 7 centuries, the old ways will return, the laurel will turn green again. And this passage of 7 centuries from 1321 to 2021 has just worked itself out, and we've just reached this time that was foretold in the past, the time when the underground stream is supposed to break surface. The occult and only really exists because all that data, all that secret information is dangerous, and we've been forced to hide it for centuries and centuries, to hide from the inquisitors and from the people who would torture and destroy sorcerers, whatever you want to call them, high priestesses, witches. It's difficult to give a label, but there's a reason that sorcery and the supernatural has been hidden for all these years. And in my heart, I'm always hoping for a day when it will be safe to openly discuss occult history and for the hidden tradition to no longer be hidden. I think we're just on the cusp of it. And there have been enormous changes in the last few years, which are seemingly in tandem with the working out of the prophecy. Most notably, there was a popular plebiscite in 2009 when where 75% of the inhabitants of the region voted to basically abolish the former departments of Languedoc, Roussillon and Midi-Pyrenees and roll them back together into the geographic entity of Occitania, the former country that had existed there. And it seems strange to me that Occitania fell off the map for 7 centuries and managed to bring itself back onto the map again just in time for Belibast's prophecy to fall due. Also, we had a deputation of Holy Roman prelates trying to apologize for the genocide, the first attempt by the Catholic Church to acknowledge and apologize for their actions of the 12th and the 13th century. We're still half-assed. It was a group of them came with shepherd's crooks and carrying green laurel leaves because they were aware of the prophecy. But notably, the Dominican order refused to participate. The Dominican order still refused to acknowledge the crimes of the Inquisition or to mention that any of that happened. And I think you can't forgive a crime until it's understood, and that still needs to be done. At this point in time, the top Catholic prelate for southern France, who's the Archbishop of Pamiers, Father Cardinal Jean-Marc Aichen, and the mayor of Toulouse, who's our senior political figure, have both requested that Pope Francis come in person to Toulouse or Montsegur to apologize. But thus far, the Pope has not acknowledged, and the Dominican order haven't acknowledged it either. So some part of it's still outstanding, and I would like to see that resolved in my lifetime. I would like to see the Cathar prophecy work itself out.
Let's hope it's so. Another thing about Pyrenees area. Last year I was in one big seminar which was held by UFO research groups, and there was some French ufologists who said that in somewhere in the Pyrenees area there is lots of sightings. Have you ever testified something like that, like UFO sightings in Pyrenees?
Well, there's a lot of lore surrounding UFO sightings, and I've certainly seen a lot of things in the sky which I would classify more as UAPs, unidentified atmospheric phenomena. There's a very high iron content in the mountains, so there's crazy lightning. And I've seen lightning doing things that is technically impossible. Sheet lightning, ball lightning, flashes and flickers, and a lot of the time also you see energy releases, flashes of light coming up off the mountains or coming up off the rocks that have no conceivable source, which is presumably it's similar to a phenomenon known as the Marfa lights in America. I suspect it's spontaneous energy releases from tectonic faulting. The Pyrenees is where 2 tectonic plates are grinding against each other, and under intense pressure it's possible that energy is stored in rock and is somehow released. And it's also odd how these unidentified lights in the sky and seem to always come at such freaky moments. They always. If it was purely a physical phenomena, it would just happen randomly. But it always, the circumstances always seem super bizarre. And then beyond that, there's a whole bit of mythology around the mountain of Bucharest.
Okay. Can you tell more about it?
Yeah, Bucharest is the zone's main UFO window area, where people tend to see alleged alien craft. This largely stems from an individual named Jean de Rigny, who lived at the head of the Salles River in the late 20th century in a house called the Domaine de la Salles, which is a super creepy place at the top of the river. And Jean in the 1980s made a series of analog tape recordings of what he claimed were extraterrestrials or ultra-dimensional beings moving around underneath the floor of his house. And then he subsequently played these tape recordings on French national television in the 1990s, thus putting into people's minds all over the area that there was an underground UFO base or some kind of ultra-dimensional force underneath the Bucharest. And this idea has continued to roll ever since the emergence of the analog tapes, which is a story that I kind of used as a plot thread in Colour Out of Space, the Nick Cage movie I made a few years ago, where Tommy Chong plays the guy who's making the analog tape recordings of the aliens moving around underneath his cottage. But this Jean de Rigny's stories, he also claimed that he obviously to have seen craft parked above the house, and I believe there's even a book floating around in German from Jean, which I haven't read, where he's talking about his different encounters with people from Umo and these different alien beings. That all fed into a situation where we had an outbreak of epidemic hysteria in 2012 when the Mayan calendar ran out.
Okay.
Where the French government decided that they needed to stop people coming to the Bucharest for the end of the Mayan calendar, and came down very hard on the area. A state of martial law was declared in Bucharest and in Rennes-les-Bains. Helicopters and Republican Guard were brought in to fully seal off the area, and it became what they called the controlled zone. No one was allowed to cross the zone perimeter unless they could prove their own property or had official residency inside it, and they attempted to really pin it down. And the efforts of the French army to stop anyone from going to the Bucharest, of course, just encouraged people to further believe that if the military was so keen to stop them going in, there must be something in there, and that it was kind of a feedback loop that just
easy to understand. Do you have any theories why those sacred places like that castle and those Bucharest main mountains, why people have those sightings over there? Is there such kind of inertia which might affect your consciousness that you are easier to make observations, or do you have some theory why those can be observed in that kind of places? What is it special?
Well, I mean, I get with the Bucharest and most of the mountains, it could be something to do with the electromagnetic fields and the high iron content. There's something very geologically unusual about the Bucharest. It's magnetic. It affects compass needles. It can affect aerial navigation. Also, the geological strata of the mountain are back to front. All of the oldest layers of the mountain are on top. At some point, there's been a massive upheaval, and the entire mountain has been somehow turned upside down. There's certainly been colossal, seismic and tectonic forces at work millions and millions of years ago. But it's also clear that human beings have been living there a very, very, very long time. All of the oldest human remains, the earliest Cro-Magnon remains, are coming out of the Ariège and the Ardèche, and out of here we have the caves of Lascaux, Trois-Frères, some of the oldest examples of human artwork. I think the first representations of the human face in art are on the cave walls there. So people have been there a super long time. The oldest stone circle that they found is so deeply embedded in the limestone in one of the cave floors that it predates the emergence of Cro-Magnon man. So we have to assume that Neanderthals were already making stone circles and carrying out some form of ceremonial worship in these mountains, even before humanity as we know it emerged from the Ice Age. So there has been some continuous history of ritual worship over the years. And the Bucharest is super strange because it's inhuman. Whatever forces at work there is nothing to do with us. It's a natural force of some sort, or if there's unidentified flying objects, then I don't think they're necessarily shy visitors from another planet, but are more likely to be manifestations of complex natural forces that have always been an immediate part of our physical environment, things that maybe are operating on a different channel, maybe are outside of human perception, but are possibly always been a part of planet Earth. Whereas Montsegur, on the other side of the zone, is a little different because it's human. The castle's man-made. It's kind of an act of magic. It's beautifully positioned. It's certainly channeling whatever natural energy was there on the mountain, but the design of the place and the history around it has concentrated that natural energy, and in a way which is man-made, which is as a result of human craft and human history, this mythical white lady and whatever forces haunt the mountain, are human, and relate to an earlier phase in our history, and to whatever it was that the Holy Roman Church was so determined to stamp out. It's the Holy Roman Church treated these people like a virus. Their whole approach was to try to separate them from the rest of the population, to make certain that they found every single person who had touched them, and to first of all make certain they were not in contact with anyone else, to destroy their language, their books, and then to incinerate them and to try to cauterize them from history, to leave no trace. And whatever's there is also something which was powerful enough to scare the Pope. It was a force that they figured that if they didn't erase all trace of it, would endanger the hegemony of the Church. And I suspect that remains true. In period accounts, refer to Montsegur as the serpent's head, or the synagogue of Satan. And I think it still retains this ability to act as a thorn in the side of Christendom, and to potentially bring down the patriarchal Roman Church.
You have been living in that area quite a long time already, and when you have lived there, you have of course been very close of that energy, what is affecting on those places. Is this energy also affecting dreams? Has it changed your dreams since you arrived there? Your dream world, has it been more clear, perhaps out-of-body experiences or something? Has it effect on your dreams and that kind of subconsciousness?
Yeah, I think the power of the place, it's probably so of many places on this planet, it's powerful enough to ultimately overwhelm one's own sense of identity. A lot of people start to believe in reincarnation. There's the Cathars themselves believed in reincarnation, although Christianity, they admits aspects of Buddhism and pagan animism. But a lot of folk who come there, and we get maybe between 100 and 150,000 pilgrims, tourists a year coming to the Grail Castle. A significant proportion of those folk start to cry when they first come to Montsegur, or feel a sense that they've come home, or somehow belong to the place. And a chunk of those people start thinking that they must be remembering a past life. Certainly, the British psychiatrist Arthur Gurdam interviewed any number of effectively bourgeois people in Somerset who believed that they were reincarnated Cathars, which he writes about in his book. But just living and working on the mountain, and I was really the only English-speaking tour guide on the mountain for about 10 years. You start to realize every summer you get 3 or 4 Esclamonds. You get Esclamond de Foix is a very popular figure for modern day people to imprint onto. Men tend to imprint onto Raymond de Paray, the Lord of the Castle at the time of the siege, or onto Brother Matthias, or one of the Cathar Perfecti who allegedly smuggled out the sacred treasure. But you can literally get 3 Brother Matthiases in the same bar at once, or you get 3 or 4 Raymond de Parays showing up at the museum every year. Number of Cathars who are actually incinerated on the field of the stake in 1244 is probably around 260 people. But the number of people who remember dying at the stake is definitely in the thousands. So the simple explanation that they're all reincarnated Cathars can't be right. There has to be some other force at work also in Cathar ideology and in their belief system. If you die a martyr's death and you take the consolamentum and follow all the stages of their faith, you're meant to be liberated from the cycles of material incarnation, not thrown back into incarnation as an insignificant bourgeois person living in Bath. Something would be wrong with their faith if that was true. So I think there's some other mechanism at work, which is almost like a morphogenetic field or a dream that always returns, something like a broadcast or a frequency, something which is going on, which it gradually invades one's consciousness, so that you start to almost experience someone else's memories, even if you don't think you're a reincarnated Cathar adept. It only takes a couple of months of living in the area and you suddenly start feeling that it's time to learn how to use a longbow, or you think maybe I should buy chainmail, or you start to pick up these strange 12th, 13th century ideas. If you're a filmmaker, you suddenly want to make sword and sorcery movies, or it starts to impact on one's life. One starts drawing fantasy comics, or one digs out one's old Dungeons and Dragons role-playing games.
Well, when I was child, I was playing those a lot. So do you think that when people spend their times in that kind of surrounding, they become more sensitive to sense those energies from surrounding, and then this their consciousness might reach those lowest levels of collective consciousness, which is onto the place, and then they track those visions and energy and information, and then it shows them life like they would like to play those role games again. Is it something like that?
I believe so. I think it's powerful enough that it can capsize one's own sense of identity and subsume one to the service of the place. I spent 10 years looking after the castle. Yes. And I see similar things happen in the Holy Lands. In Jerusalem, they have something called Jerusalem syndrome. Jerusalem gets far more tourists than months ago. A significant number of tourists go a little funny every year in Jerusalem. They have a permanent ward at the hospital in Jerusalem for dealing with people who are overwhelmed by the experience of visiting these sacred sites. The slippery slide is kind of the same. People in Jerusalem traditionally start to identify too closely with one figure or another from the Bible. They, for instance, start to feel a close personal identification with the prophet Gideon or with Saul of Tarsus. The next thing they start feeling the need to dress like that, to start wearing the bed sheets from their hotel room, to make pilgrimage to all the places associated with the character. And they normally don't become a problem or a public menace or health problem until the point where they feel they need to drive the money changers out of the temple, climb onto the altar at the church in Bethlehem, address the people or try and tell them the truth. They often feel they've been chosen as to bring back the true Christianity or to give the true message of the faith, which is usually the first time that they get arrested. Generally, they found that simply by sending people home, people usually recover within a week or two of being removed from the sacred site. It's simply the whatever it is, the morphogenetic field, the energy of the place is so strong that people's sense of identity can be completely subsumed by it, to the point where you forget who you are and you start thinking that you are the prophet Gideon, or that you are one of the Cathars or the Crusaders, and you're dragged into it. It's like a holding pattern that, or some kind of broadcast that remains super strong. And as a result, it keeps recurring. These events and confrontations feel the need to be played out over and over again. Certainly, Montsegur remains a very difficult place to live.
Yeah. Richard, I guess now it's time to close up this interview. We would have a common topics for hours and hours to talk, but I know that you have a long trip ahead. But is there something what you would like to share, like last words for this interview to the audience who is watching this?
Well, I do believe in the Lady of Montsegur. I don't think that she's something that's been dragged out of my own imagination and made manifest. I think there is a force there. And from what I've seen, there's a lot of things connected to the story which are beyond any kind of normal law of probability. 2021, for instance, was 700 years after the death of the last Cathar adept, but it was also 777 years after the fall of the castle in 1244, and it was also 77 years after the 3rd Panzer Division Das Reich executed a bunch of partisans in Montsegur on March 16th, 1944. It seems to me that these recurring events, the way that they recur and recur down through time, all three of those events being to do with a pattern of accusation of innocent people being accused and sacrificed, it will continue to play out until the situation is fixed. And I think for me it shows that there is some kind of force at work, and I think it's become more crucial in the present day because we're now really facing a bunch of issues that probably impact on humanity's long-term survival on this planet. And there's more and more a need to reappraise the way that we're living in terms of our relationship to planet Earth, and also the relationship between the genders, the crisis we're now facing with the collapse of the old forms of patriarchy and the emergence of militant feminism, which also connects deeply to the Cathar story and to this running battle between the papacy and the Cathar high priestess. So I'm very much hoping that peace can happen. For me, the Holy Grail is a symbol of the marriage of the sun and the moon, the harmonization of opposites, something which is illogical and can't really happen in real life, but it has to happen. I have to pray for an end to this ancient spiritual war. I have to hope the day will come when the forces of spirit and matter and light and darkness can find some kind of balance. And I should dearly like that to be in my lifetime.
Well, I hope that this will come true in some day, and it has been very nice and honor for me to talk with you and have this interview. Thank you, Richard Stanley.
It's been a pleasure, sir. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.